Lovecraft at the Movies, Episode 2, The Thing from Another World. It's from 1951, and it's directed by Christian, not sure how to pronounce this, I'm just going to go with Nabai. How is this related to Lovecraft? Well, it's based on a novella titled Who Goes There, which itself was inspired by At the Mountains of Madness. I have mixed feelings about it. At the Mountains of Madness. It's very scientific. You can really tell that Lovecraft was very passionate about the subject of Arctic exploration. He clearly did a lot of research, read a lot, read the reports of the expeditions. It makes it feel very realistic, makes it feel very authentic, but it gets a little bit overbearing at times. The story is really weighed down by just pages and pages of all these scientific details. The descriptions of the Arctic landscape are really good. They're very bleak, very stark, but you've got these giant mountains, this sense of scale, this sense of time, and total isolation. This is a world that's totally separate from what we've seen before as a species. The Elder Things ancient city is really well described. Lovecraft, that's one of the things he was really good at, is describing these enormous, insane cities. But it ends up being a giant info dump about the history of the Elder Things. Lovecraft, one of his problems was he told and didn't show, he had a bad tendency to do that. The Shoggoth is really cool. It's no wonder that it's been used in so many other things. We see the black oil, the black goo appear in a lot of media, but the problem is that he doesn't really use it for much. He doesn't take advantage of the fact that it can transform into anything. It doesn't disguise itself and ambush them. It doesn't disguise itself as a person. It just kind of chases them through tunnels and they lose it. And that's where the story Who Goes There picks up where Lovecraft left off. It takes full advantage of that idea and turns it into this paranoid nightmare. Unfortunately, this film adaptation of that story fails to do this. The creature in this movie isn't like in the story, it doesn't transform. I do like the look of the creature. It's this big brute with these big clawed hands. It reminds me a lot of the common depiction of Frankenstein's monster, but it's not a Shoggoth at all. A big emphasis is placed on how the creature is actually really a plant, which I guess is supposed to make it seem very alien, like it's just an entirely different form of life. That feels very 1950s to have this plant creature walking around. Instead of being a shapeshifter, he's now kind of like a vampire consuming blood, and the main threat is that he can breed very rapidly. The monster isn't in the movie very much, but when it is, it's pretty memorable. He busts through walls. There's a sense of power, of relentlessness as he's just wading through gunfire. They're setting him on fire, and just nothing can stop him. There's also the really memorable scene where they open a door and he's just right there. The characters put a lot of thought into their actions. They're not your typical horror movie victims. Everything that they do has a purpose, even if it is ultimately a mistake. At least they're trying to do something smart. They communicate with this very punchy, very scripted dialogue that makes the movie feel really old school. There's also some very epic music that makes it feel very old school. One of the characters kept saying what sounded like holy cat Instead of holy cow, holy cat. Was that slang back then? I'm not really sure what was going on there. Instead of paranoia about who might be an alien, the main conflict is between the scientists at the base and the crew of the military plane that arrives to help them. Both groups tend to follow their leaders who disagree on what should be done about the alien. The scientists want to try to make peace with it, and as you would expect, the military guys want to destroy it. The head scientist's portrayal is something that you should be able to see coming a mile away. Ultimately, the conflict between the two groups of characters comes off as ham fisted, and it's very unsatisfying compared to the paranoia of the story that it's based on. On top of everything else, there's this very cocky reporter character. This reporter is constantly whining about not being able to get the story out, even though there's a pretty valid reason for it. He's kind of weirdly half demonized in this film. He helps out a lot, he picks up tools and helps whatever he's needed, but at the same time, he faints during the final battle. But then in the end, of course, he gets to say the really cool line about watching the skies. There are way too many people in this movie. It makes the setting feel a lot less isolated when you've got so many people crammed into one room. Just like at the Mountains of Madness and Who Goes There, there's a lot of scientific jargon and details. There's a lot of setup and exposition about why the flight crew is going there, with them uncovering the saucer. The movie is very muchly a slow burn. You get almost halfway through it before anything really happens. A lot of people enjoy older movies like this with the punchy dialogue, with the slow moving plot. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it, but to each their own. One interesting thing is that the alien is radioactive, and they use a Geiger counter to hunt it or to as a warning if it's going to attack. What they call it a cosmic ray counter, which is pretty funny. But the way it's used to build tension really reminds me of what would be done in the movie Alien with the motion tracker. If you're looking for a Lovecraft film, this probably isn't a good place to go. If you're looking for a 1950s horror movie with some kind of monster that has a very specific weakness, and the protagonists have to figure out what that weakness is and lower the monster into a trap, then yeah, you could do a lot worse than this one. All in all, I'd give this a 5 out of 10. It wasn't bad by any means. There was things I liked about it, but it just really didn't squeeze my trigger. And finally, 30 years later, John Carpenter would remake the movie, simplifying the title to The Thing, and it's a lot more faithful to the novella. But that's a discussion for another day.